Hello, everyone, and welcome. Please let me know that you can hear me. You can see my wonderful co-panelists. Let me know by saying Happy Wednesday. You can say Happy Hump Day if that's your preference. And let us know where you are broadcasting from. So I'll get started. Happy Hump Day from New York City. I'll go with Dylan. Dylan, happy Wednesday to you.
Hi there. I'm here in Park City, Utah.
All right, awesome. Karen, happy Wednesday to you.
You too, Shai. Hi, and greetings from Princeton, New Jersey.
Oh, wonderful. Trista, happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm in here from Mill Valley, California.
All right. And last but certainly not least, Tracy, happy Wednesday.
Hi, Shai. Happy Wednesday. I am here in Castro Valley, California.
All right, wonderful. We have a nice representation of the United States here. And looking at our chat, happy Wednesday from Nashville and Fort Collins, Denver, NYC. All right, keep it coming. We were going to get started. Hello, good morning, and good afternoon to in-house counsel and in-house legal professionals from all across North America and the world. Welcome to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you for spending your breakfast time or your lunch time with us, and special thanks to our wonderful sponsor, Paragon Legal, and our fantastic presenters today, featuring Dylan Ramsey, Karen Galley, Trista Engel, and Tracy Scanlan, who are going to teach us resource management best practices for in-house legal teams. And we're going to learn how to navigate when to leverage full-time employees, outside counsel, and flexible talent for optimal results. This is our 9th webinar of the year, and I'm wondering, are you here for the first time, or have you tuned into an IHC webinar before? While you're taking the poll, I have some quick housekeeping announcements. First and always at In-House Connect, we want you, our dear audience, to get involved in the program. And we don't have polls. This is our only poll. Actually, we have one poll. I take that back. We have one poll coming your way shortly. So when you see that poll pop up, please participate and let us know your thoughts, and feel free to supplement your answers as well in the chat box. But besides for that one poll, we want this to be as interactive and engaging as possible. So feel free to engage in the chat box, and here's throughout the program, and here's some guidance on how to do that. The first thing we love to encourage at our events is networking. We're a networking group at our core, and we love to keep that going. So feel free to network through our throughout the webinar. How does one network at a virtual webinar? It's really simple, as several people have done it already. Please tell us who you write a blurb, tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do, where you're located, and include a link to your LinkedIn profile page. Take that blurb, put it in the chat, and voila, networking. People will connect with you, and you will connect with others. And shout out to David and Erin and Tamara for getting us started in that regard. We've helped thousands and thousands of people connect through our webinars, and we're hoping to facilitate thousands more. So networking is a great way to engage in the chat. And of course, the chat is great for questions, comments, reactions. We have a wonderful panel today and a great topic. So if you have questions that you're going through or things you want to discuss, put it in the chat, and we'll go from there. Now, keep in mind the chat box is recorded, it is publicly available, may be shared afterwards. So just keep that in mind as you engage in the chat box. Next, this is a CLE webinar, so please listen carefully if you're pursuing CLE credit. I will be announcing 2 course codes throughout the course of the program. You'll write these course codes down, and then you'll enter them into the CLE submission form, which you should have received via email. If not, my dear colleague Sabrina has just posted links to those, to the form and to the slides. Or I take that back. They're to the handout. They're not quite slides, but they are a handout. So those resources are available to you. If you have any trouble receiving them, you can email Sabrina at inhouseconnect.org, and she will assist you. Please be sure to get your CLE submission to us a week from today, which is February 6th. So you have a week. In my opinion, do it ASAP once you hear the second code, so that you won't lose track of any materials. And lastly, your Zoom name has to match up with your actual name. So I see somebody in the chat who's or in the audience whose name is Brady. Brady, it's wonderful to have you here, but we need your full name. So you can right-click on yourself in the Zoom client and rename yourself. I see another person whose name is CD. Again, really happy to have everybody, but please right-click on yourself in the Zoom client so we have your full name so we can issue you CLE credit. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can email sabrina@inhouseconnect.org. And if you have trouble changing your name on Zoom, you can message me privately and I will correct your name. But that's CLE. And again, any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email sabrina@inhouseconnect.org and she will assist you. As far as upcoming events, we have a ton of upcoming events coming your way in February and beyond. I will post a link to our upcoming events page so you can see it all, but I'll highlight our in-person events. We are coming to Austin and Houston on Austin on February 19th, Houston on February 20th, and Miami on February 27th, and many, many more mixers coming your way, including Denver and more. So stay tuned for more on that and check out our upcoming events page if you haven't already. All right, let's get to today's program. Resource management best practices for in-house legal teams. And we're going to learn how to navigate when to leverage full-time employees, outside counsel, or flexible talent for optimal results. We have a fantastic moderator today who I'm very happy to introduce as Tracy Scanlon. She is as Paragon Legal's Vice President of Client Development and Legal Affairs. Tracy enjoys the challenge of matching one of Paragon's many talented lawyers and resources with just the right client and supporting the company's multitude of ongoing business relationships. A mother of 2 young children, Tracy is a strong advocate for parents remaining in the workforce in a meaningful way after they start a family, and she's thankful to work at a company that shares her philosophy. As a former litigator, she can relate to and empathize with the day-to-day life of a lawyer. She's also worked extensively in project management and business development, giving her insight into what businesses need to succeed. Tracy, it's wonderful to have you. Welcome to In-House Connect, and I'll turn things over to you to get us started.
Thanks, Shai, for that warm welcome. It is really, really great to be here today, and we are so excited to be talking about right sourcing. So what is right sourcing? It is ensuring that the work is getting done by the right people at the right time and at the right cost. It's the process of understanding your full spectrum of work that your legal department handles, and then finding the best resources to own that work. So this can include, as Shai mentioned, your in-house team, your outside counsel, your legal technology, and your flexible legal talent partner. This topic is critical because right sourcing maximizes your legal spend and efficiency, improves team morale, reduces burnout, and which ultimately, benefits your business clients and your company. Paragon Legal is an alternative legal services provider that has been providing in-house teams with high-level experienced attorneys and legal professionals on an interim basis since 2006. We operate nationally with clients and candidates across the United States. And as a leader in offering clients cost-effective, innovative solutions and attorneys different ways to practice law, the topic of right sourcing is near and dear to our hearts. Today, along with our CEO of Paragon, Trista Engel, we are so lucky to have 2 legal leaders, Karen Galley and Dylan Ramsey, who are able to share their perspectives on right sourcing and staffing up their legal departments. And hopefully you, the listeners, are able to see yourselves and your legal departments in Karen and Dylan. Karen is currently general counsel, and she has risen through the ranks at pharmaceutical company Otsuka US for 22 years. Otsuka is a global conglomerate, and Karen is responsible for the U.S. pharmaceutical business with 2,500 employees, where she manages a team of 45 attorneys and regulatory and operations professionals. Dylan is the Chief Legal Officer of iFit, a privately held consumer and health tech company, where he manages a legal team of 4. Dylan previously served as GC at Vista Outdoor, a publicly traded outdoor recreation product company with a legal team of 20, and he's also held senior roles in the approximately 200-person legal department at Capital One. So we are so excited to share their wisdom today and get their thoughts about right sourcing. So Karen and Dylan, thank you again for being here. And Trista, thank you for being here. We are going to jump right in and talk about and start off talking about maximizing the value of your legal spend. So when you think about legal departments, we typically have 3 people-based options. We've got FTE, full-time employees that work in-house, outside counsel, and interim flexible legal talent. So Karen and Dylan, can you tell us a little bit about what factors you've considered in deciding which route to take?
Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
Karen.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, so, obviously FTE, I think is based on what you have in your budget and what headcount you have approved. I don't, we have a very process-driven process to get more additional FTE headcount. You're working on an annual basis. It might be kind of a long time until you get into the process, or you have to jump in with a special exception to get it. So it can be hard to get additional FTE based on what we do. And I'd like to take the outside counsel route and just add a twist to it in that I've used secundees from firms a lot. And that has been, a big benefit to us in that people can step in. They're very well trained. They don't necessarily have the in-house perspective, but they're very well-trained associates who bring a high level of skill set to projects. And I have definitely used the outside counsel route for overflow projects. And then for flexible talent, I've also had good experience using that. And to add a little twist to that bucket, I've used flexible talent as a consultant role as well, not just a producer of work and handling overflow. I've found some very experienced people, with Paragon as one who can step in and really be a strategic advisor to me in a very, as an SME in a certain space. So that's how I've utilized those bigger buckets of options.
Thanks, Karen. And you mentioned using interim legal support sort of in 2 ways, as a consultant and also as a producer. Do you have some examples of the type of work you would give to a consultant versus a producer?
Yeah, so one example is I've got somebody who's a very high level legal operations professional who I was anticipating the need for coverage in a leadership role. And so I reached out to Paragon. You have, an excellent individual in your stable of people who came in, and I realized how talented she was. And I asked her, while she was here, can you do a maturity assessment? Can you do the following? Really deployed her on some, very strategic projects, and has been, with her years of experience, able to, really accelerate the growth of our operations group and help advise on structure and best processes. So.
Awesome. And I love that you were able to bring someone in and they were kind of able to grow into this role also.
Yeah.
Dylan, what about you?
So I tend to think of it in terms of, what I see as the kind of strengths and weaknesses of each type of individual. FTEs in my teams tend to be generalists who have a very keen understanding of our business, the people, the strategic goals, the risk tolerances involved, and can really be upfront and proactive and issue spotting. And that's where I need FTEs. Outside counsel I tend to only use them when I need somebody who's a real specialist in something that's highly technical, or something that kind of requires, a state law qualification like litigation, or, something that is a really fast moving area of law where we just, because of the pace of our business, can't really keep up internally with changes in the law. Interim talent is something I've used more and more recently, and I've primarily used it because it's cost effective, and you get, particularly when you're hiring interim attorneys, you get attorneys who have an in-house background and have some of that kind of in-house seasoning and practicality that sometimes outside counsel, particularly junior outside counsel, don't have. And they can move through things pretty quickly and efficiently, particularly when you have kind of high volume projects or, peak periods of demand. I work in consumer goods, so, our workload is, there are a lot of peaks and valleys over the course of the year.
Thanks, Dylan. And it sounds like just, listening to both of you, it sounds like there's a multitude of factors that you take into account, right? So Karen, you mentioned, budget is one, like the timing and sort of how hard it is to get each resource is one. And then also the specific type of work. Is it something that needs a lot of, deep institutional knowledge? Is it something that needs subject matter expertise? And both of you mentioned, having that in-house savviness, which I think is a really important thing that sometimes people don't think about, is doing legal work for an in-house legal department is very different than working for outside counsel and kind of stepping in and, giving you like a memo or giving you like the absolute right, perfect thing to do, right? With in-house, you are working with stakeholders, you're working with the business, and having that prior experience is really important. I guess, Trista, let me ask you this. Do you have any, what sorts of use cases have you seen other clients, use interim legal talent, or other factors that you've seen sort of come up?
Yeah, I think they each really do have their pros and cons, and Dylan and Karen elucidated on some of the ones they think about for their own teams. There are really powerful use cases for each of those three people-based resourcing options. The four biggest factors we tend to talk through with in-house teams when they're trying to decide how to resource a new matter or a particular time of year are, number one, the volume of the work. Is it full-time? Is it part-time? Is it ad hoc? Or are we not sure? The second is the longevity of the work. Is this going to be an ongoing need? Is it seasonal? Is it temporal in some way? Or are we not sure? The third piece is the nature of the work. Is it highly specialized? Does it require institutional knowledge? Is it high risk? And the fourth is budget, which tends to be the constraint. Those are the four biggest factors we tend to talk through with clients as they think about which resourcing option is optimal. We have a great decision tree that walks through a few simple questions to help jumpstart that thought process of how do you determine the best resource for you, for your team, for this matter, and right now, because situations are very different for different companies, for different types of matters, and for different time periods. The decision tree is in the CLE materials that you all have received or will receive. And it's really important to think through some of those questions as a starting point for how to figure out which of those factors matters the most to you and what direction will they take you.
Thanks, Trista. And Dylan and Karen, both of you touched upon this a little bit in your previous answers, but can you let us know, what are some of the, and the purpose of right sourcing really is to make sure you have the right mix of people all working together. It's not, one is better than the other. There's plenty of times where you're going to use all three. So Dylan and Karen, can you share a little bit about, what you think of as the advantages and disadvantages of each of those three options? And Dylan, I'll turn it over to you first.
Well, I mean, I think I kind of approach the question as where am I going to get value for money, right? And, and that's, outside counsel tends to be very expensive, particularly like the bigger law firms. And so you have to use them judiciously when it's going to actually add value. I mean, using an outside counsel, even a junior associate who's billing $500 or $600 an hour for an ordinary course commercial contract just makes no sense to me because the value is never going to be there. But using an interim lawyer or contracts professional whose hourly rate is substantially lower could add a lot of value, particularly if it increases speed. And my business is always focused on speed. Like that's the thing that they care about most, is get it done quickly. So in some areas, outside counsel makes a lot of sense. Big, high stakes litigation, M&A, capital structure changes like, refinancings and the like, outside counsel makes a ton of sense there because the numbers involved are so much larger and, it can absorb the cost of, a overpriced mid-level associate. So.
Thanks, Dylan.
I'm going to focus on risk. Dylan, obviously I agree with the points that Dylan brought up about budget and cost and so forth. I think if you look at, our roles in-house are really to be business solutioners and to, take an appropriate amount of risk, that's within the company's tolerance, within the appetite, to get to a business solution. So I think on the spectrum, outside counsel is going to be more conservative, and they're going to, provide the least risky option, because they know, they deal with all the other clients' problems in the end in litigation and so forth. I think interim talent also, can feel maybe less enabled to provide a risk-based answer unless, you really spend time and work with them, in those client-facing conversations to say, like, we can take a little risk here, or have them come back to you. So there is a certain amount of oversight that's needed. I think, sort of setup time to get
Mhm.
that interim talent, to understand your risk tolerance and to be able to feel comfortable with that. And then an FTE, obviously, it's personality based, but sometimes I think, you can get people to be in that, risk-based company, work stream, as far as risk goes.
Mhm.
So, and I guess I just want to emphasize, there is a certain amount of, it's not, it's not a service to you or to the interim talent to come in and just say, okay, day one, go. You do have to, there's a oversight, there's a, for it to work for all sides, you have to put time into it, is my experience.
I'll add one more dimension. For me, the biggest disadvantage to hiring an FTE is if you're not completely sure what the right person looks like, or if you'll need that person long term. Hiring is the hardest and most important job we have as leaders, and making mistakes here can be very disruptive and very costly. Similarly, letting someone go is much harder and more painful and disruptive and costly than you would think. So you want to make sure if you're hiring an FTE, you feel confident that it's a long-term need or a long enough term need, and you know how to hire the right person. And then for outside counsel, aside from the cost, I would reiterate the point that you brought up earlier, Tracy, that, the thing that sometimes gets overlooked is that law firm lawyers are really good at being law firm lawyers. And that's a really different job than being an in-house lawyer. So I would just say to be, aware of the time that will be required with a law firm secondee or even outside counsel on a new matter, primarily with advising in a way that is business friendly, that has the appropriate level of risk tolerance and has risk tolerance, because every company needs to have that. And then communicating in a way that's accessible to and useful to your business teams.
Thanks. Yeah, all of that really makes a lot of sense. And Karen, I wanted to follow up on something you said about, oversight and training the interim counsel. And that's a really good point, right? Just like if you were to bring on any consultant or outside counsel for that matter, you need to get them up to speed and let them know this is what you want. And so providing that upfront investment is really important, regardless of whether you're hiring, an interim person, an FTE, or outside counsel, is giving them that baseline, the tools that they need to do the job that you're hiring them to do. So all of that makes a lot of sense. And I just wanted also to throw out really quickly in the audience, if you have questions for our panelists, please feel free to throw them out in the chat. I will be keeping an eye on them so we can be asking folks in real time. Don't feel like you have to, write them down and wait. So feel free to throw them in the chat. And then I guess one other thing I would add is when you think about right sourcing and how you staff up, you don't have to think about it in like one project, right? Like you can use all three in a combination. So you don't have to say like, hey, there is this one product coming out and I need outside counsel on it. Maybe you have a new product launching and you're, you don't have an SME on that. You need someone, but you need someone that is embedded with your team that can work with your engineers. Maybe that's something that goes to, interim support because they're embedded. Maybe with that product, you also give your full-time, maybe junior associate in-house a chance to elevate and sort of be like a product leader on that. And so, you're giving them the opportunity to practice at the top of their license. And then, for that product also, you talk to outside counsel to, get all the information about like the regulations, like compliance, everything that needs to be buttoned up and stuff like that. So I also just wanted to throw out that you don't have to be so, boxed in, and with one project, you can divvy it up in a way that makes sense for yourself and your team, your business partners, and your budget. So Susan, thank you so much for the question we have. Great. What tools and resources do you recommend having on hand for quickly onboarding and getting up to speed interim counsel? Karen, I will turn this over to you first.
Well, there's a certain amount of training that being in a regulated industry, there's a certain amount of training that any contractor, we call them, flexible talent, has to undergo about our products and so forth. So there's a baseline amount of information that's learned about the company's business. I think just as to enabling people to understand your company's risk tolerance or your, department philosophy and how they're, how you expect them to interact with people. I think it's a lot of, just personal time, one-on-one, conveying that information and having touch points. And if you can't do it, then making sure that, someone of your trusted team members can do it and understand that that's their role. So that's how I operate with it.
Dylan, what about you? Do you have any like resources or playbooks or anything like that that you are able to hand off to folks?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, I think for us with interim talent, it starts with, having a bench of interim lawyers that we know, because as Karen said, I mean, onboarding an interim lawyer takes some time, getting them integrated into the, into the business, into the team, into the, risk tolerances and strategies involved, takes some time. Once we've kind of got that bench established, I mean, my internal team, my FTEs spend a lot of time developing forms and templates for contracting, marketing, terms and conditions for promotions, claims review, things like that we have a lot of volume of and that we use interim talent to help with during peak periods of demand. So an interim lawyer who comes into our team, we plug them into our contract management software, and they have access to our whole library of forms and templates and contracting playbooks so that they can operate pretty independently. Now, my team generally does a lot of oversight because, one of my cardinal rules for my team is we never hide behind outside counsel or the interim counsel and say, oh, this was a mistake by outside counsel or interim counsel. It's all legal. We own it, and so they have to provide some oversight and make sure that things are moving quickly and we're meeting deadlines and not doing anything really foolish with our contracting.
Great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I, Dylan, you brought up some kind of another really good use case is having, and because you've done this for a while now and have this experience, you have kind of established a group of people that you've worked with before, and if they're available, they can come back. And we've seen that with other clients too, where, either they bring someone back for peak times, like maybe end of quarter sales pushes, if that person's available, or they have one person that's really great and they can move them from different legal department to legal department because they have that institutional knowledge. So you're not sort of reinventing the wheel, which I think is another really good use case.
Generally speaking, the best interim talent providers are the ones who can provide, a list of resumes of people who have relevant industry experience, because I think, it's important to me that the people we hire, particularly to do things like marketing and commercial contracting, have consumer goods experience, because somebody who spent their whole life in oil and gas really just isn't going to understand our business. So. Right.
Absolutely. So you train them on your business nuances and your people and your risk tolerance, but you're not training them on the law and that sort of thing.
And in many cases, contractors who have done this before have the experience of knowing how to get up to speed on a new industry, on a new company pretty quickly. The value of bringing in an interim resource is that you get someone experienced, whether it's the specific practice area or the industry experience and the contracting experience, where their value is coming in and hitting the ground running. you know, to the point of this part of the conversation, they absolutely do need some base level training on your specific business model or risk tolerance or pace or systems, processes, etc. But they've got that experience of going into new companies and hitting the ground running pretty quickly.
Yeah. And Christian had a good hack in the chat about training new lawyers on products and revenue, and it is again is showing them your sales deck, which I think is such a great idea. The other thing that Paragon does too is when we onboard folks, we provide both parties with what we call an onboarding checklist, where it goes through sort of best practices, like where are your templates, who do I ask for this, like establishing all of those things to make sure that everyone's starting off on the same page, and you can kind of easily go through that list to at least get a baseline and get, you know, kind of jumpstart your onboarding. And then David, to your point, has Paragon contracted resources at less than 40 hours a week? Yes, we do. We do full-time and part-time folks, and happy to provide some additional information later if you would like to chat. So something that both parties, Dylan and Karen, have touched upon, and Trista, you as well, is budget, which is a huge factor in consideration in determining, you know, all of this stuff, whether we get FTE, whether we use outside counsel or interim legal talent. So we will just dive right in and hopefully give the audience some practical tips. And so when we tackle budget, let's discuss, you know, how and when we budget for resources. And then we can also dive into specifics on how to, you know, make the business case to get that budget. And so, Dylan and Karen, one of the challenges that we see very often is that budget for FTE headcount is usually separate from budget for resources or outside counsel. Is that how it is in your organization?
Yes. Yep.
Yes, I'm happy to start. I mean, it's not separate, but it is scrutinized more closely because it's viewed as a fixed expense.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it's, you know, as you alluded to earlier, right? Like you can't, once you've brought on an FTE, cutting that cost later is harder, both culturally and financially.
So when do you usually start planning for this? Is it like at the end, you know, at the end of your fiscal year? Kind of when do you start thinking, gosh, I need to start plotting out like what kind of money I need coming up?
So we have an annual budgeting process that starts, you know, a couple of months before the end of our fiscal year. You know, for me, that annual process it sort of starts with a bottoms up process. Like, what do I know? What's on the docket right now? What litigation matters do we have? What's our IP portfolio look like?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what does our software cost, FTEs, others, all those things look like? And then I build a bottoms up forecast for that. And then, you know, I add budget for, you know, I call them the known unknowns, right? Like, you know, we're a consumer company, we make treadmills. So we do have a fairly robust products liability docket because people fall when they're on treadmills. And, you know, so I assume that we're going to get, you know, a certain number of products liability cases filed over the course of a year. So I budget for those. I budget for some IP enforcement work, you know, and a few other areas where we know we may not be able to identify the actual matter when we do the budget, but we know we're going to have some of it. And so I put some budget in there and I state my assumptions when I present it to my CFO. This is what I've assumed. And so if I get more than X number of products liability cases, you know, each new one is going to add this to my forecast for the year, depending on when it comes in. So that's, you know, so that's the annual budget. Now then, you know, when we have ideas for new business lines or new partnerships or new acquisitions of other companies, you know, each of those is a budgeting process too, right? Because you want to make sure that the legal support requirements for those businesses or those projects are built into the business case that whatever business owner of that project or deal or whatever is presenting to leadership. So, you know, that's just one input is, hey, you go out and buy this company and they have, you know, one in-house lawyer either that's going to be a synergy because I think I can support them with my existing team, or I'm going to have to add some resources to support that business.
Thanks, Dylan. Yeah, and it sounds like you factor in a lot, right? Like that you're making these educated guesses based on what's happening before, and then taking a lot of things into consideration, like new products, your tech, all of that stuff, and potential litigation that comes down the road, which I think is important, just to factor all of those things in and kind of make sure you're accounting for all of those things. Karen, what about you?
Yeah, similar corporate process as Dylan described. I think when I found that I need additional support, either with outside counsel for overflow or interim talent, it's usually a reaction to a big business event. And I found that having a very good relationship with your finance business partner and the CFO, and really having them really understand that we're reactive to business events, that we're not necessarily project drivers or corporate enterprise project drivers. We don't have those built into our budget, that we need some pot of money to go to when these business events happen. I do sometimes, rarely, if necessary, bill things back to the department that's causing this business event. So if there's some special initiative that needs legal support and it's coming out of, I don't know, marketing or medical or something, I'll go to them and say, look, I can support you, but you need to give me X to get some extra talent on board to help with this. That's a philosophical thing that I'm sure everybody on the phone deals with, as far as like, how do you operate? You don't want to be necessarily arm's length from the business and always charging them for things, because then they don't come in the door when they need you. It's a deterrent if you're always going to be asking for money. So we really try to be at the table, have the budget ready, that we own. And so I go to that option infrequently. So
Yeah. That's a really good idea though, Karen, because that might not be something that other people have thought of. They think like, oh, it has to come from legal's budget. What do we do? And I mean, I think even if you were to approach the business partner like as a team, right? Like, hey, we would love to do this, but how do we work together? I think that's a really good idea. And you'd mentioned, having really good relationships with your CFO. How do you kind of build that up?
I mean, for me, it's Karen, if you
go
want to
ahead, Dylan.
I mean, for me, it's a credibility thing. I mean, my CFO, he actually asked me to do my budget by month for the year, which is nearly impossible for legal, because legal work is pretty lumpy, particularly litigation. So a lot of things like litigation matters kind of get peanut butter spread over the course of the year. And I just communicate to him like, look, I think, we might be under this month, but I think that work is coming, right? We know this thing's going to trial eventually, right? So we're going to, there's going to be a lot of ramp up there. I mean, as the longer I'm with a business, the better my forecasting and budget can be. And in my experience, CFOs love accurate forecasts. And so the better you can get with that, and the better you can be at not surprising them, the more they're going to trust you to run your budget effectively. Right now, I mean, this year we learned that, I mean, it should have been obvious to us, but there was a lot more seasonality in iFit's business than there was at Just Outdoors. And so, the product launch and end of year holiday promotions kind of all came at the same time. So October, November, and December, I used a lot of interim resources to just keep the contracts and marketing wheels flowing. And that'll be in my budget in future years. Like that'll be in my forecast, and it'll show up in October, November, and December, so I don't surprise my CFO.
I see Shai's on. I don't know if you want to give a code, and then I'll give my answer.
Yes, thank you, Karen. So our first CLE code is Paragon, right? Paragon as a Paragon Legal, Paragon 129. So Paragon 129. A reminder: your Zoom name has to match up with your actual name. Message me if you have any issues, and I'm going to launch a poll that we will get to when Tracy is ready to tackle it. So we're wondering, how do you handle peak periods of demand? All right, thank you. Back to you, Karen.
Yeah, thanks, Shai. Yeah, I just want to add that I think as it goes with any other function in the company, understanding the pressures that they're under and really, doing your part to support them. I think finance is often sort of the brunt of jokes. So people say like, oh, I can't do that because, our CFO's name is Steve, because Steve won't let me, just, it's intended as humor, but it gets tiring after a while, and, sort of speaking up on their behalf and saying like, we all own the budget, if you do that special folly, that's money that doesn't go to everybody else, just sort of lending a hand. And it goes with legal too. I always appreciate it when people step up and say, legal risk and compliance is everyone's responsibility. So, just relating to them on a personal level and the pressures that they're under, I think really goes a long way. And the door, makes it more welcome when you show up at their door for, extra money that you need.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think both Dylan and Karen, you both touched upon like being good partners, right? I think, being partners with your CFO, being partners with your business partners, and letting them know that we're all in it together. Legal is not a blocker. I think is, really, really goes a long way. And Melanie, you asked a great question. So I'm going to throw it over to Dylan and Karen. As you know, legal is not always valued by business. In your experience, how have you managed that pushback on your proposed budget to your senior leadership team? Karen or Dylan, either one of you, feel free to jump in.
So I take as my assumption going into work every day that every dollar spent on legal is a dollar that can't be spent on marketing, and that my CEO and CFO view it that way. And so, for me, establishing the credibility that I'm not spending money foolishly, that I'm not, that we are keeping our eye on the bottom line and trying to do it efficiently, because they know, they've been around a long time. They know that there's some legal risk that needs to be managed. They know the consequences of poor contracting. They know the consequences of poorly managed litigation. They know the value of IP.
Yeah.
And so you just have to, for me, you have to establish the credibility as a GC that you are keeping your eye on the bottom line. And for me, requires constant benchmarking. I know legal spend as a percentage of sales is a really blunt instrument, but I do benchmark, and I show that to my CEO and CFO when I do my budgeting every year, so that they know that we're not spending more than other comparable companies. And then I also try to present a lot of data. Hey, here's the number of contracts that come through the department every year. Here's the number of marketing support requests, review requests. Here's the products liability portfolio and how that's moving over time. All of those data points so they can understand the move in my budget from one year to the next.
Yeah.
I think it's also just, professionally, gently reminding people of the value that you do bring. And I think that, summarize what Dylan was saying is, write down when you do have a success, write down when, you really significantly helped a strategic project, get it across the finish line. And also, spread the wealth around. If you're on a multifunctional team and you have some sort of internal award system, give the awards to other people, then they feel better about you. And, you're not always looked at as a blocker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of times, legal wins are articulated in terms of losses avoided, right? Or
Right.
rather than actual, we're not adding sales, we're not adding dollars to the bottom line, although sometimes, IP victories can bring money in. But, one of my prior jobs, we used to call it the Dare to Be Great memo, which is like the list of the things that you want to highlight at the end of the year. And I do keep those notes. And, when I start my budget presentation, the first slide is, hey, here are the victories for the year. And I try to articulate them in terms of money. So that, yeah.
I think one of the most powerful tools for that is something you mentioned already, Dylan, which is showing how you're impacting speed. And if the business is trying to grow by X% next year, that means X% more contracts, which means how many attorneys do you need to be able to keep the same speed and move those things through? That's real dollars that you can sort of tie back indirectly to the legal team.
For sure. And data's key to that. And, every department I've ever worked for has had its challenges collecting data and what data, and, there's always some concern about how that data is used. Things like turnaround time and other, kind of metrics, if you can get at them, can be very dangerous if, put in the wrong hands. And so they have to be put in the right context. But, in our contract management platform, which we now use a general workflow platform, like I can tell you, by lawyer and by by type of task, how long it takes from the day it comes into the door to the first time, legal touches it and turns it around, and how long it takes from start to finish. And I can articulate that to my CEO when arguing for new headcount.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I that's super helpful. And it touches up on Hannah's statement in the chat where she says, I think we're often seen as a cost center stopping sales from closing deals. But I think, Dylan, to your point, and Karen, if you are able to say, hey, like, we brought on this, we helped close these deals. There's this new product launching, we need a ton of more people, our current headcount right now is slow. We can't churn through these that quickly. But if we were to bring on interim support, if we were able to get, make the business case for additional headcount, we can do this much faster, I think is very compelling. But it is tough, right? Because it's hard to prove a negative, right? Like we negotiated this deal so well that no one sued us, or we did this so well that no one did this. But I think there are numbers that you can put to this, put to that. And I would say, even if it's not sales, even if you're in procurement, everyone wants something, right? Like marketing might want to onboard a new agency. IT might want to onboard a new vendor. That's all things that legal has a hand in. And if you have more headcount, if you are able to do that, then you can also support your business partners with their goals and stuff that they're trying to get for their team. Dylan, you mentioned metrics, which is great. This kind of segues into, our other section about like, what do you need? What sorts of metrics do you look at, right? You were talking about turnaround time, how long people, take to do things. There was a question in the chat from Damaris. Are you using any tools or software to help you forecast the budget? And Dylan, I think you mentioned a workflow tool that you use. Is there anything else that you use?
Yeah, I mean, we have a matter management platform, like I'm sure most in-house departments do at this point, that that we use for primarily for outside counsel engagements. And so that that's one way of tracking outside counsel use. And and that platform has its advantages and disadvantages, but it does give you data on what you're spending for each law firm. It can even give you data on how law firms are staffing matters. So if I look at our products liability portfolio as a whole, I can figure out, which firms are overusing partners, which firms are using a lot of associate time. We can use it to enforce billing guidelines and that sort of thing. But those kind of overall metrics, I mean, the metrics that I find most useful for my CEO and CFO are the ones that they understand, right? They understand, hey, we submit a request into, we use Lexion for our workflow management. We submit, if marketing submits a request into Lexion, how long does it take for legal to turn around comments? And I can give them that number. I can give it to them by lawyer. I'll never give it to them by actual lawyer, but I can give it to them as a whole.
Yeah.
And how, products liability cases, like how many cases do we have on the docket this year versus last year versus the year before? I can give them that data over time.
Mm-hmm.
And, it allows me to both demonstrate the need for the coming year, but also show the good work that we've done over the past years. I mean, I was just showing my CEO a really great graph of our products liability portfolio over time, starting back in FY22, 2 years before I got here to today, and the decline in those products liability cases, which is the result of a whole host of factors, from product quality to process improvements we've made.
That's awesome. Karen, do you use a specific tool to kind of get to these metrics?
Yeah, it's kind of collecting things from different places. We do have ServiceNow, a ticketing system for some, we have obviously clinical studies. And so certain things related to that go through there. Matter management, finance. We have a brand review. Any marketing materials have to get reviewed. So we have a system with Viva. So it's aggregating things from different systems, but there's also, I'm toying with it. I haven't reached perfection yet of how to reflect complexity of things.
Yes.
There's a lot of advice and counsel. Some of it's quick, some of it's long, and it's to reflect the dimension of the complexity, because it's not always quantifiable, as far as days or money or things like that. So
Right.
still in search of that elusive metric on that.
I mean, I'll make my pitch here that it's not really relevant to the question. Well, it's not directly relevant to the question of whether you use interim talent or FTEs or law firms. But if you don't have a matter management platform that will allow you to do analytics on your law firm's bills, get one. Because, you know, I mean, the longer I do this job where I'm accountable for the budget, the more I realize that the incentives for law firms are just totally out of line with what really matters for our business.
Yeah.
You know, junior associates are graded on how many hours they bill, right? And so that leads to a ton of inefficiency that's sort of just built into the system. And, you know, the work product that comes back, you know, you get it in the form of these sort of TLDR emails that that they spent hours and hours and hours on when it really wasn't necessary. Or, you know, you spot that associate who's billing 60 hours a week to your matter, and you know he's got other work going on, right? And so if you can't do those analytics, you're kind of going to get taken advantage of by your law firms. It's just built into their whole business model.
Yeah.
If you don't have a platform for the analytics, I agree, hugely valuable to get one. If you can't get one, there's, you know, there are things you can track in Excel. It's much more manual, but if you want to track the turnaround times, if you want to track spend by firm and by level and all that stuff, you can do that in Excel, and it can be powerful even if you don't have a tool. So all is not lost if you don't have a system. Agree with Dylan. Try to get a system, but there are still things you can track in Excel that will allow you to pull together that data to make the business case for a system or to show the value of legal. And I'll add that, you know, some of our clients, every client budgets differently, and some of our clients are in sort of use it or lose it situations at the end of the year or at the end of a quarter, depending on how frequently they review and reforecast. And in a use it or lose it situation, that's actually a perfect time. If you have that excess budget, it's a perfect time to tackle some of those back burner projects. One of the areas that we've gotten a lot of inquiry recently is in legal ops. And Karen, you've got one of our great legal ops professionals, but this type of reporting and analytics and data gathering is perfect for a legal ops person and a perfect use for that excess budget in a way that can really add value to your team, can elevate one of those projects that is actually really important, but never deemed to be specifically urgent. And we've got a lot of clients who come to us, you know, to get some really value added stuff done end of quarter, end of year.
Yeah, I mean, this job at iFit is actually the first one where I've really had a good way to track metrics for the work my internal team is doing. My last job, I once proposed, you know, having my internal team keep track of their hours, and I had the peasants with pitchforks and torches at my door. Because nobody who's in-house wants to track hours, but Lexion does allow us to do a lot of metrics for just workflow management, because everything kind of comes through that system, and the attorneys now are used to using it, and you know, as long as they're updating the status of their matters in Lexion, you can get a lot of data on what the workload is that your internal team's handling. And I'm sure there are other platforms out there. But you know, to do that effectively, I had to have a legal ops professional who knew how to get that value out of Lexion.
We're implementing Onnit's matter management platform. We've only had Legal Tracker so far, but didn't really use it for anything outside what went to outside counsel. So we haven't had that non-outside counsel advising, you know, those projects captured. So I'm excited to start getting metrics, but we're not fully deployed yet. So
yeah, I mean, it takes a while. It's a lot of research. And again, that's another great use case for bringing someone in who can do that research and compare. And I mean, I think the takeaway really is like, we need to speak the language of finance, right? And the business leaders, and the quicker you equip yourself with that and sort of get with that program, the better it is. I did want to say too, though, Karen, you mentioned complexity and how that's sort of hard to quantify. And, you know, when you were saying that, I was thinking, there is something to be said about paying for peace of mind sometimes too, right? Where you can, I mean, you've been at the company for so long, you've built up this trust. Like, there is something to be said about like, okay, maybe XYZ turnaround isn't this, but I'm I feel comfortable with the advice, and it's worth my peace of mind to know that I have this like trusted person doing it too. So, but that's a great thing to think about. It's like, how do we quantify that in a way that is compelling to the business leaders? I do want to say something really quick. So the results of the poll, how do you handle peak periods of demand? 58% of people said ask outside counsel. 17% said use an ALSP or interim counsel. 8% said hire an FTE, and 30% said other. If you want to throw in the chat your other, I have an assumption that other means white knuckling it and divvying it up against your existing team and just dealing with it. But I mean, you know, to the point that a lot of people have said, asking outside counsel is expensive, right? It's very, very expensive for very short term, what might be kind of rote work. So, you know, to kind of just throw this out there, if you are to explore alternative options like interim support, that is a very, very quick and easy way to show value to your team. Like last year, we spent, you know, however thousands of dollars when we had our quarter end sales push. This year, we spent X dollars. It's a very easy and obvious way to show like cost savings. And look, like we get it, right? Outside counsel, they're easy, you know them. But you know, to everyone else's point too, like sometimes they're not the best for in-house stuff also. So it's worth exploring some of these other options, especially, you know, during these times when it's not super urgent and you're not taxing your existing legal team. And I think the other thing too is, yeah, deal internally with fairy dust and the spell, work harder and just get it done. And I think a lot of times people underestimate the toll that takes on their internal team, right? It causes churn, it causes burnout. It's a very short-term solution, and you're kind of just kicking the can down the road to something else. So again, I think to Dylan's point, like thinking about those known unknowns in advance and planning for it is great. And then again, if you have extra budget, you can use it for something else.
I
Thank
think
you.
what you brought up, Trey, sorry to interrupt, is that
Yeah, no, please.
on your team. I mean, you've spent a lot of time hiring and training and building out your own team. And if you continually go, and you know, obviously sometimes you're going to go to the same person, right? You're like, oh, my go-to person is X, and they're going to get all of the work. You're going to burn them out, and they're going to leave. It is not sustainable in the long term. So I think that's important to consider as well.
I mean, it's one of the reasons that I generally hire generalists. I mean, it's consumer goods. I mean, in Karen's world, there are obviously a lot of scope for in-house specialists on certain regulatory issues, but for a consumer goods company like ours, like just having people who know the business and can move fast is important. Because even before we get to interim talent, right? Like, you know, I have a weekly staff meeting, and I try to suss out who's busy and who's not, because there's always going to be somebody who has more bandwidth and somebody else who's drowning. And so my sort of second kind of cardinal rule for my team is we back each other up and we try to smooth that out as much as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I am going to move forward to our next section just because we are getting close to time, which is great, and keep the questions coming. But Dylan and Karen, based on your experience, we'd love to hear just some of your lessons you've learned and practical advice you have for people that are dealing with this for the first time. So I guess, do you have any common pitfalls and, you know, advice on how to avoid them and when you're thinking about implementing your right sourcing strategy?
Before we get
I'm sorry, Shai, go ahead.
Okay, it's all right. Before we get there, our second CLE code is Paragon, Paragon 921. So Paragon 921. If you have trouble, editing your Zoom name, you can message me, but I think everybody's a Zoom pro on this webinar, so that's fantastic. And I love the audience participation. Please keep it coming. Some great stuff in the chat. Been really great to see it. I'll get back to it once we conclude our discussion, but thank you to our wonderful audience. So Paragon 921, and on to the lessons learned and practical tips.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the big lesson is, I mean, the goal here is flexibility, right? Like, and for my department, the goal is to be able to adapt to changes in circumstances, to, you know, to peaks and valleys of demand. So to be flexible, you also have to be ready to be flexible, right? And so you can't, I mean, it always takes longer to onboard anybody, whether it's an FTE or interim talent, than you think. And that's why I think so many people still go to outside counsel, because it's easy to pick up the phone and, you know, your relationship partner is always happy to take the work and farm it out to whatever associate. But to get actual value for money, like using a law firm often is not going to be the right answer. So you have to be ready to bring on interim talent when needed. And so my bias now is interim talent, but like I said, to do that, I have to have a bench that I'm ready to go to. They're names that I know, they're people who know us, who've worked for us before, and we're still expanding that bench. I mean, I think, you know, every company is going to need a bigger or smaller bench, but you know, because interim talent is sometimes going to be not available, right? The lawyer you used last month might not be available because they've moved on to another project. So you have to have a couple of names and just pick up the phone, and you know, and that way they can get onboarded really quickly. You know, and in some cases for us, like they still have an iFit email address ready for them when they get here.
Yeah, I guess my biggest tip, I've already brought it up, is really think about it creatively and think about the different ways that it's not just overflow. You know, it can be building templates, as Dylan mentioned, or you know, working out your contract negotiation playbook, you know, ops, special projects, you know, deploying IT takes a ton of time. So, you know, bringing somebody on dedicated to just that then keeps your people focused on, you know, the day-to-day business. So just really think creatively about how flexible talent can help you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Trista, do you have any sort of words of wisdom?
Yeah, I would reiterate what Dylan said, which is that, you know, the need will arise, but you don't always know when. And when it happens, it's immediate. And you would be surprised, or maybe not surprised, to know how many of our clients come to us with a need where they needed someone to start yesterday. And even for things that you might think there was, you know, plenty of visibility. And it helps a lot, even if you don't have a stable of contractors that you've used before. If you've had a conversation with the company and you know what the process looks like, what's going to be expected of you, you can think ahead a little bit about the questions that, you know, a place like Paragon is going to ask you in order to do our best work. Even that is good preparation to have a quick turnaround and quick onboarding and quick selection of someone who can step in and help you. The other thing I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dylan.
Oh, just to pile on there, Tris. I mean, I think the other key is data, right? Like, I mean, you can see these trends in the data. Like, you know, I mean, I remember looking at one of our reports and saying, why are we getting so many marketing review requests right now? And you start drilling into it and you realize that like marketing's just staffed up and they've got some new people with a bunch of new ideas, right? And all of a sudden you've got this wall of new stuff that needs legal review. Oh, and by the way, they all need it by, you know, a week from now. And there's no way to adapt your resources to meet that spike in demand if you can't see it coming.
Yeah, great point. The other thing I would reiterate also came up earlier, which is just the ability to set clear expectations. You know, whether you're hiring a new full-time employee, bringing on a contractor, using a new vendor or consultant, any new engagement, any new relationship benefits hugely by setting clear expectations up front. Even things like, you know, what is quick response time or responsive mean to you? It means something different to Dylan, to Karen, to Tracy. So setting those expectations, working expectations up front, particularly as well if it's, you know, a 20-hour per week engagement. Is that 3 full days a week? Is it 4 hours every day? You know, what are the expectations? Setting those clear expectations up front is the biggest risk mitigator in bringing on interim talent.
And also setting those clear expectations for your business clients. I mean, our matter intake system has our standard turnaround times built into it. So people know, we communicate that to folks. And I've actually had to have some hard conversations because a lot of people have come to iFit from other bigger companies with legal departments with much deeper resources than I have. And so I have to say, hey, sorry, it takes a week for us to turn around a contract. Like we're not Verizon, we're not Capital One. We don't have an abundance of lawyers to do this. So.
Yeah, the setting of expectations is huge. Christian asks in the chat, how do you overcome the fact that you may need to onboard over and over if interim moves on versus a trusted outside already knowing the business well and is more stable? I can chime in really quickly on that. I mean, Dylan, you just mentioned you pick up the phone and you call your outside, counsel, your relationship partner is happy to take on the work. But for the most part, they're passing it on to someone else too, right? So I guess one of the things I would say is even with outside counsel, you may or you may not be getting the same person every single time. But I think it's true. It is a consideration, and it's one of those things where you plan ahead for, right? You set the right expectations. You have your templates all in one place. You have hopefully some sort of onboarding process that you're able to use again. And that is helpful. And I think, to also Dylan's point earlier, if you get the interim talent that has the industry experience, that already has a lot of the basics, you're really just training them on the nuances of your company. And a good interim person, they are able to ramp up quickly because they have done this a lot and they have been in a lot of different environments. So that's what I would say is probably something to kind of think about when you're thinking about these different options. And then Sang Kyun asks, what would be the main difference or main distinguishing character between outside counsel and interim talent? And to that, I would say it depends. I mean, with Paragon, we really ask the client what you are looking for. So a lot of our interim talent, they have law firm experience, they have in-house counsel experience. So I wouldn't even think about, outside counsel versus interim talent because, outside counsel is going to have different experience as well. And I think it is important to, vet your legal partner well. It's important to vet the candidates well to make sure you're getting the person that you want and need for this particular role. Dylan, Karen, Trista, do you guys have anything to add to kind of those two questions?
Well, I mean, I'd say the interim talent that I've used they all have in-house backgrounds, and I think that just brings a level of practicality that you just don't get from outside counsel usually. Particularly if you go to outside counsel and say, hey, I've only got a couple $1,000s to spend on this, they're going to give it to a junior associate who probably doesn't know your business, who maybe doesn't really have a materiality bar or has a materiality bar that's just too low for your business and is kind of hyper focused on every risk, and they're just not going to be able to do things as efficiently as a seasoned in-house lawyer. And the seasoned in-house lawyers I get as interim talent are often far cheaper than the outside counsel.
Yeah. I mean, certainly there are times when you need to go to outside counsel if, state privacy laws are changing all the time and I need a gut check on something, or employment laws, it's just an area where that's what they do and that's where they specialize, and they're going to be an instant source of information, but you just realize it's going to cost you a little bit more. And I just think you need to think about the model that you need. So.
The other thing that I just wanted to throw out there also is like with right sourcing, you don't have to get it right, like right away. I think there's a lot of, especially if you're new to it and you've always just gone to outside counsel, or you've never had to, plan out your budget the way that Dylan and Karen have, you don't have to get it right away. Like, you can talk to people in the industry. Like this is, I think, is super helpful, sharing ideas. You can get a really great ALSP partner. And, we're out there pounding the pavement all the time. We know what the candidate market looks like. We know what the full-time candidate market looks like, and we'll let you know, hey, like, this is what's going on. And so, there's a lot of resources you can tap into. And, you don't have to feel like, oh my gosh, now I have to buy all of these different systems and I have to like onboard all of these people right away. But, there's a lot of people that can talk to you and kind of guide you through different use cases to figure out sort of what is the right mix that I need, and, what's the right budget and timing and all of that stuff too.
And for those who haven't tried this before, you also don't have to jump in with both feet. You can sort of step into it with test runs, pilot programs, smaller pieces of work. We've done plenty of that with clients, helping them figure out what can we carve out so you can see how this works, so you can get comfortable with it, so you can understand what this model is like. And then if it works, you can build it into your longer term, bigger picture resourcing strategy. That's, that's our job. It's hugely valuable just to learn and try, and it's our job to make it easy. And even if Paragon isn't the answer, we'll tell you that too. We love having those conversations.
So before I close things out, I wanted to ask Dylan and Karen, do you have any sort of closing words of wisdom to our group?
Nothing that I haven't already said, but available if anybody wants to email and just maybe, be a thought partner.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same. This is obviously a topic that I kind of live and breathe, and it's sort of my favorite topic to talk about. So happy to share what I've learned over the years. I mean, a little bit of this comes from I have a background in corporate development, and sort of have always kind of thought in terms of EBITDA and value and budgets. And so, that's the perspective I bring to every engagement resource decision.
Well, thank you both so much. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and your time with us today. Trista, thank you for being here, and the audience. Thank you guys so much for your great questions. And similar, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or Trista. Shai, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Great job moderating, and Trista, Dylan, and Karen, excellent job. We really enjoyed your insights and your tips. I have a question for Tracy and Trista. So we have a poll up. If you're interested in learning more about Paragon, and quite a few have said yes. I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit more about Paragon and what makes you different from other ALSPs. What's like the secret sauce, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, I can jump in really quickly. We have been around for a long time. This is all we do. So we live and breathe interim support, know the market really well, and have a great team. And we really just value the relationships. I think what makes us really different is all of our people have made the conscious choice to practice law in this way. All of our team members, they have been on projects, for multiple years. They have a lot of great experience, and they have, they've made the choice to practice law this way. We have a great network. We have a lot of clients that decide to join the Paragon attorney team when they're looking for something different. I was a Paragon attorney before moving to this side of the house, and and I think that happens because we really focus on what you're really looking for, not just substantively, but the soft skills and the cultural fit between the person and the company. And so we take a very bespoke take to this. We think it's sort of like matchmaking for us, and we really like it. And we don't try to fit a square peg into a round hole. We really approach this as being your partner. We want to get it right. And I guess the other thing I want to say is, even though we do take this bespoke approach, we are very fast. So, you can come to us if you needed someone yesterday, and we are still able to, do our best to get you someone. And so I think we really value the relationships we have with our team and our clients, and really care about that match.
We also have what we believe and know to be true in the market. We have the highest quality attorneys. We have a very rigorous vetting process. We vet every attorney at least 3 times, including specifically for the work, before they ever get sent over to a client, or before a client ever talks to them. We accept fewer than 5% of the attorneys who apply to Paragon. We really rigorously vet folks and have amazing attorneys who can really add value as part of that. And then once we find you that perfect match attorney, we also support our attorneys. We have a specific attorney development team whose sole charge is to ensure that all of our attorneys have a great experience on project, have the feedback and guidance that they need. So as a client, you are not solely responsible for the success of the engagement. We're there to support the attorney. We also have a similar client development contact on Tracy's team, who is there to support the client. So we really think about the full life cycle of the engagement and making sure we are always doing what's best for our clients and our attorneys.
Awesome, sounds great. Sorry, okay. I wasn't sure if Dylan or Karen wanted to say anything else, but all right, we will wrap up here. Thank you so much. I guess Tracy and Trista, you didn't have a chance for a final remark. So do you have any final remarks before we sign off?
I would just thank everyone for being here. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk about this, even like Trista mentioned, even if Paragon isn't the right fit, we love talking about the market. We've been doing this for a very long time. I'm still, mired in a lot of legal stuff. So I'm always happy to chat.
Yeah, we're grateful for the awesome participation. Thank you so much to Dylan and Karen. Thank you, Tracy, for wonderful moderation. We love talking about this topic, and we really appreciate the great participation and engagement from the audience. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Tracy and Trista, Dylan and Karen, and thank all of you for tuning in. I hope everybody has a wonderful Wednesday. We will sign off here. We'll be back next week with more. So until then, have a wonderful weekend, a great rest of your Wednesday, and take care.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Shai.
Thanks, Shai.
Thank you.
Beautiful.